Hi guys and welcome to Chess 24. I'm Jan Gustafsson and I keep talking about the Qatar Masters, which has been a lot of fun to follow. In the last round, tournament victory is decided on board 1 between Yu and Vladimir Kramnik. But the most exciting game was played on board 2, where Anish faced Vladimir Akopian-Giri with the black pieces. Now, Anish, once in a while he's accused of being a bit of a drawmeister, of playing too many draws. Can't say that this time around. He started with 6 wins, then lost 2 games against Kramnik and Yu. Today he's still in the running for the top spots, but not really for tournament victory. He's facing Vladimir Akopian, here we get a picture, who has always been one of the superstars of the Armenian team. I think he's better known as a team player than as an individual player nowadays. Armenia, I believe, 3 times Olympic champion, is that correct? I think it's 3 times. And Akopian has always been tremendous in team competitions. He's having a good individual tournament this time around, but he does have his work cut out for him, facing Mr. Anish in the last round. So let's go straight to the game. Akopian with the white pieces. Both these players on 6 out of 8 before the round. Akopian goes for 1 e4 as he tends to. And Anish, who's flexible, but he's been playing quite a bit of Sicilians recently, especially the Taimanov, as I think we call it in English, which is this opening. Knight c3 and queen c7. A line played by both Giri and his friend and training partner Robin van Kampen, who has done some nice series for us. Long castles, bishop to b4. This is the main line of the Paulsen nowadays. It's the so-called English attack, bishop e3 and queen d2, because a lot of guys like Nigel Short started playing, John Nunn, started playing it, I believe in the 80s, with this very simple cavemanish approach, go f3, g4, long castles. Used to be considered not that great if black has not played d6 yet. One reason is that this bishop can move out. But chess has become a very concrete game, and this is a very trendy line. Long castles, bishop to b4. Here we see this bishop actually moving out and threatening knight takes e4, f3. Huge tabia of modern chess, this one. And Anish plays the, to my mind, most logical move, which has been in fashion, then out of fashion, then in fashion again, the move knight to e5. People have also played the more sophisticated looking move knight to e7, planning to support d5 in some lines. I believe even knight a5 has gotten the occasional outing, but knight e5 is of course a very typical move, eyeing this square, opening the c file where bishop takes c3. Could or could not be a threat according to the situation. Knight to b3 is one of the main moves, probably the main move in this position, clearing this diagonal. And here it's not that tempting for black to take on c3 immediately. These endings are actually pretty nice for white. B takes c, he does have the double pawns, but all the dark squares are so weak. All these squares are really inviting the white bishop in, and this is not a lot of fun to play with black. So black players have resorted to the more dynamic move b5, which is played by Anish in the game. Now a very typical Sicilian move, the move king to b1, always useful, and one of the reasons they do call it long castle is that you normally need an extra move, which is king c1 to b1 to complete the long castle. A nice side effect to king b1 in this particular position is that if black were to castle at king's side, which looks natural enough, white wins instantly by using knight takes b5, a little tactic. Point is that bishop takes d2 is no longer check, as it would have been with the king on c1. So after knight takes c7, white wins. However, all of this is well within the realms of theory. Anish played bishop e7 without much thought, and says, I accomplished my mission with bishop b4. I convinced you to waste some time, arguably, with knight b3, king b1, and now it's time to go home. Bishop e7, queen to f2, typical enough move, occupying this diagonal. Bishop to b7. Once again, typical enough. Bishop to b6, chasing the black queen away before he centralized the bishop, going to d4. Queen to b8 is kind of forced, and bishop d4. All of this has been seen before. I'm not a huge specialist. I think you could probably make a case or analyze a move like knight to a5, trying to keep this construction in place a bit longer. Might be an interesting idea, but you would have to ask a serious specialist of this line, and I don't doubt that Anish Giri, who tends to be booked up to the eyeballs, is one of the serious specialists here. Bishop d4, d6. This position has only been seen in one previous game where the very strong German grandmaster, not so active nowadays, Christopher Lutz, played the move rook to g1, preparing g4. But Akopian sees no need for such subtleties and plays g4 straight away. Giri seemed to be still in book here. He blitzed out his move b4. And now, all of a sudden, after white's next play becomes extremely sharp. Not saying it's not sharp here, but this is more or less a typical Sicilian position where people are likely to castle on opposite sides of the board. Black tries to make something happen on the queen side. White tries to make something happen on the king side. But here, after b4, game really heats up. Akopian plays knight to a4. Which is a standard reply, blocking a later a5, a4, but I believe it does have a tactical flaw here, and I believe it's a mistake, even though it's not a mistake for us because the game becomes a lot of fun afterwards. I think you should have played the more humble knight to e2 when we have the aforementioned typical Sicilian battle after a move like maybe queen to c7 back even. Not quite sure what he would have done. Knight f d7 is also a serious option. Then maybe looking at a5, a4 in the future. Very complicated position. Don't ask me who's better and why, because I don't know. After knight a4, Giri blitzes out the very strong knight takes f3, which looks like it's losing material, but it's actually not. First point is the one in the game after queen takes f3, this bishop takes e4, and you win the rook back. That is obvious enough. But the question is, why not bishop takes f6? Little intermediate move, and after bishop f6, queen takes f3. Looks like white is a piece up. But here we see the point of black's combination. He just quietly attacks this knight on a4, which has nowhere to go, as sad as it is. And black wins his knight back with an extra pawn. Even here, there's still some tactics in the position, like bishop g2 you could start with, intending bishop takes a4, e5, and white wins. After bishop g2, there is a very cool, calm, and collected bishop to e5, blocking e5 mechanically. Next move, bishop a4, and black is in good shape. So a very nice trick, one I haven't seen all that often, to just pick up this knight at the end of the line. Instead, Akopian decides, probably born out of necessity, to sacrifice material and go for the initiative. Queen takes f3, bishop takes e4, queen to h3, bishop takes h1. Black is now an exchange and 2 pawns up, but the initiative is with white, and he wastes no time making it felt. Plays the move g5. Black has a bit of a tricky choice where to place his knight. I haven't analyzed it in depth. Knight d5 certainly came into consideration as well, but probably Giri disliked the move bishop takes g7 then. So he goes for the move knight to e4 when bishop g7 is not such a great idea because it runs into this little knight fork. However, there is an amazing resource white has here, because frankly it looks like he's lost. He's down in exchange, 2 pawns, g5 is dropping, there's nothing immediate. But he does have the move g6. And all of a sudden it's not so easy anymore. You can't go h takes g because of queen takes h8. You don't want to go f takes g because queen takes e6 is very annoying to deal with. So the black king all of a sudden will be a little bit exposed, and it's not so easy. Giri spent some time here, and I believe he made a mistake, at least according to the computer, which of course is my only source of wisdom for positions like that. I'm not going to pretend that I calculated anything here. Giri plays f6, which is a mistake. You should have played the funky looking knight to g5, planning to answer gf with king f7, which seems to be alright for black, but it is a huge mess really. Pieces are all over the board, the king is out, his bishop is still here, h4 is a threat. Over the board, I believe anything can happen, and I'm not even sure which side I prefer. So he played f6, which is natural enough, trying to keep the position closed. And Akopian played the very, very natural queen takes e6. However, our dear friend the computer points out a move probably none of the players considered for a second here, but which would have been very strong, the very quiet bishop to e3. The idea is just to vacate the d4 square for the knight. And it turns out that knight to d4 followed by knight takes e6 is a huge threat that is almost impossible to parry. And then there's some details which are hard to even understand for puny humans like me. Like e5 looks like the obvious move, stopping knight d4, and the pawn on e6 is no longer hanging. But now after queen e6, it turns out white is winning. H takes g, bishop to c4. And the white initiative is too strong, in part thanks to this bishop, which stops knight to g5 because of bishop takes g5. So all of this is computer stuff, of course. Still goes to show how complicated this position is, even for a world-class player such as Anish Giri. Went f6, Akopian took on e6, which is the second best move, but bishop e3 really an amazing resource in the position. Now queen e6 is answered by knight g5, which I'm sure Giri was happy to play. Chases the queen away, covers the f7 square, and it also makes sure this pawn will disappear next move. Queen e3 and h takes g6. Black is still serious material up, his king is still seriously exposed, but now this rook is entering the game, and I believe Giri probably wasn't too unhappy with the turn of events around here. Knight to b6, you could argue about a move like bishop d3 as well immediately, planning to take on g6, but knight b6, rook a7 looks like a good thing to include. Now he goes bishop to d3, attacking on h1 and g6. Rook takes h2. Cute little solution. One of the reasons why we call Anish Material Giri is because he likes grabbing pawns, and he does so here, defending his bishop at the same time, which also happens to be the very best move. We don't really call him Material Giri, it's a nickname. I'm trying to get going, but I think I'm going to fail. So rook h2, bishop g6 check. Some computer alternatives here, but I believe everybody would grab this pawn with check and think later. King to f8. Now Akopian, he hasn't played perfectly, and I still believe he blundered with his knight a4, but he certainly entertained us, and he keeps doing so. He goes for the move knight c5 here, which is an amazing resource, activating his least active piece. Bit in the spirit of Jonathan Rowson, who once wrote about the concept, talk to your pieces or talk with your pieces. And probably the knight on b3 would have told him, not very happy on b3, please activate me. Knight c5 is a cute little tactic really, because it looks like you can just take it, but then bishop takes c5, and if bishop takes, queen takes c5, king g8, black is a whole rook up, rook and a pawn actually, but white has the very nice move knight to c8 here, which blocks this queen's access to the d8 square. It's simultaneously attacking the rook on a7 and threatening rook d8 checkmate. And all of a sudden it would be black who has to be extremely precise to even stay in the game. I think knight f7 is the only move here. So a pretty cool resource by Vladimir Akopian, knight c5. But Anish Giri stayed cool as well, decided not to take this guy off, just went bishop c6, defending against the threat of knight to d7, and said, I'm an exchange up, I don't need a whole rook, what I have is enough. Knight e6 only leads to the exchange of this knight, but it also leads to this queen in an active position, threatening queen f7 checkmate. White has accomplished to exchange this passive knight against this good defender. So the position is still anything but clear. However, I would choose black's material here. It looks like his defense is quite conductible. Bishop e8, bishop to d3, and rook to c7. I believe the intention is to give the exchange after bishop c4, just play rook takes c4, when black, I think, ends up with a winning position. Queen takes c4, now there's no more threats, just queen b7, playing rook h1. Black should win this. So Akopian did not go bishop to c4, he went for the move rook to e1. Not sure that's the best move, it doesn't threaten all that much. Maybe rook to g1 was a better shot, introducing some ideas of queen g4 into the position to attack the g7 spot. It's very hard to play this position over the board for both sides, because white, if he slips up, he will also just be lost and material down. Rook e1 might be a step into the wrong direction here, actually. Rook e1, queen to d8 has been played. This might also not be the best move, but I won't just read out all the computer lines and claim to know what's going on. This is horribly complicated to play. Knight to d5 is an obvious move. Bishop to f7, queen to e4. And white is still kicking. He still has very active, nicely centralized pieces. Black has to be extremely precise. Bishop takes d5 is a move you would like to play, but then after queen takes d5, still the light squares are kind of weak. Bishop g6 is in the air, and it's not easy to play at all. If we make a neutral move like a5, bishop g6 is game over immediately. So bishop d5 is not a good idea. This is not a position where you should operate on general knowledge like exchange material if you're material up. It's a position where you have to calculate, and Anish plays a good move, rook to d7. Knight to f4, this looks tempting enough, eyeing these two weakened squares. However, Mr. Computer does not like it and is recommending knight b6 instead. When rook c7, knight d5 would repeat the position, which objectively is the best white can hope for here. Not clear, Giri would have been forced to repeat after knight d5. There's other moves in this position. For example, rook h5 is given by my helper, giving the exchange back, and black still remains 2 pawns up, even though it's by no means simple. So Akopian decided to go for it with knight f4, d5. This is an important milestone for black because he grabs some space and he gets a chance to activate this bishop later on. Knight g6, now this bishop is exchanged after all, but under much better circumstances for black, because he's not facing any immediate trouble on this diagonal. Rook h6 chases the queen away, queen to g2, bishop to d6. And I believe we can say that the tables have turned. Giri has conducted the defense better than Akopian has conducted the offense, and here the black material should prevail. Rook to g1 was played, rook h4, not a move the computer likes, but a move that the human likes, attacking this bishop. Queen takes d5, this is the final mistake. Bishop f2 was the way to stick around when after rook takes h2. There are still some sneaky tactics. Queen takes d5, and if rook takes f2, once again it's this diagonal that keeps white in the game. Bishop c4, the threat of queen g8 check seems to be strong enough to hold the balance here. All of this much easier said than played in mutual time trouble, but queen takes d5 is the final mistake, and after this Giri wins without any added trouble. Bishop to e7, now this bishop is going to drop, but white is not in time to create serious threats. Queen g2, rook takes d4, queen g7, king e8. Looks scary, but black is a rook up, and he will just run away with his king, which he does pretty convincingly. Not going to comment on this little king's march. A rook is a rook. Queen takes a6, rook d6, queen b6, and we can see black has consolidated. And he's going to win. Rook e1, rook g4, using the weakened back rank. Rook e7 does look tempting, but then rook g1 check will lead to mate shortly. So b3, but yeah, this is just agony. Rook g1. Not even going to read out the moves. Someone tweeted here that white's position looks quite good until you count the number of rooks. That sums up the situation pretty well. Giri went on to win shortly after rook a5, putting his extra rook to good use, attacking on the a file. Akopian resigned. Pretty crazy game. I'm still not quite sure what went on. The highlights clearly were this move b4, knight to a4 early on, and knight takes f3, which I believe Akopian missed, but it would be interesting to ask around if this was planned, a planned sacrifice. Here, a couple moves later, after g6, it turns out it's still far from simple, and it did get crazy complicated. I couldn't do the game justice because I don't understand it all myself. After bishop g6, king f8, knight c5, certainly a very cool move, very cool resource by Vladimir Akopian. But defense and material prevailed in this one. I'm not going to re-show you the whole game. Anish Giri wins his last round game, ends up with 7 out of 9. Is that true? Yeah, 7 out of 9, 7 wins, 2 losses. Pretty good result, even though I'm not sure he's going to be happy after starting with, what did he start with? 6 out of 6. Let's see what the internet has to offer. Did I prepare something? I'm not sure I did. Oh yeah, here we see a smiling Anish Giri before the game. In the background there is Niels Grandelius, the bearded Swedish Grandmaster, Erwin Lamy, the Dutch compatriot of Anish Giri. And I'm not sure who the gentleman is who's standing next to him. Let's have a look at Anish's Twitter account. Why am I doing this? Not quite sure what this picture is. It's from an earlier round against Vladimir Kramnik, where I believe he's showing him his name tag, a bit of a running gag, because Kramnik didn't know his opponent's name in an earlier round. I'm pretty sure he did know who Anish Giri was, and Kramnik went on to defeat him in that game. Kramnik is a guy who played for a tournament victory in the other game of the round, which of course I'll also be talking about. For now, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I have to say I really enjoyed the Qatar Masters. A lot of action, great tournament. Thanks everybody. Bye bye.